The galaxy didn't fall with a bang. It wasn't a sudden cataclysm or a roaring war. It was a quiet fracture, a deliberate breaking of worlds under the cold, calculating rule of High Executor Malrec Vorn. The most disturbing thing about Vorn wasn't his cruelty, or the empire he built from starvation and extinction. It was that he was human once. He built the Dominion of Ash on a simple, brutal philosophy. Only scarcity reveals true strength. And countless star systems had learned the agonizing truth of that belief. But on the ragged edge of contested space, a flicker of resistance held on. Kepri's spine, a neutral station, a haven for the desperate and the defiant, was the last real chance. And at its heart was Captain Nina Varela. She didn't command an army or represent an empire. She had nothing but a reputation for surviving the unsurvivable. The jagged scars along her jaw were a testament to a negotiation that went sideways. The deeper scars, the ones that truly defined her, were hidden from sight. In the station's central chamber, an impossible alliance was being forged. Representatives from species that should have been enemies now shared the same recycled air, united by a common threat. There were the Vorex, insectoid strategists whose minds functioned as a single, collective supercomputer, constantly calculating probabilities of survival. And the Thalassa, pale, ancient aquatic beings encased in humming water-filled breathing frames, their ancient eyes holding a merciless intelligence. Standing apart from them all was Kalrath of the Arathi. The Arathi were warriors, a species seemingly designed by a god of battle. They possessed the powerful leonine bodies of apex predators from a high-gravity world, and from their backs sprung vast avian wings that gave them dominion over the skies. They were gold-furred, taloned, and beaked a fusion of raw strength and brutal grace. And they were nearly extinct. Kalrath's own wings were scarred, one of them partially burned. A permanent reminder of the day Malrec Vorn glassed his homeworld after the Arathi refused to bend the knee. Nina Varela broke the tense silence. Her voice was steady, betraying none of the weight she carried. The Dominion advances. We all know what happens next. They don't negotiate. They don't leave survivors. The room remained quiet, thick with the unspoken fear of annihilation. Then Kalrath spoke. His voice was a low growl, like stone grinding against stone. Vorn offered my people mercy, he said, the word tasting like poison. He called it conditional survival. We refused. The Thalassa emissary tilted its head, the water in its frame sloshing gently. You refused, and were annihilated. A fire ignited in Kalrath's eyes, a burning ember of grief and rage. No, he corrected, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. We were betrayed. The horrifying truth unspooled in the chamber, a rot that had been festering in the shadows for years. One of the races present in that very room, a species long thought to be neutral, had sold the Arathi's planetary defense codes to the Dominion. In exchange for their own safety, they had sentenced an entire civilization to death. Malrec Vorn didn't conquer worlds by himself. He cultivated fear like a crop, then harvested the betrayals it produced. For Nina, this revelation felt like a physical blow. The familiar, crushing weight of a past choice settled deep into her bones. Because she knew Malrec Vorn intimately. Years ago, in a different life, she was the one who helped put him in power. She had believed his promises of stability, convinced herself that a harsh peace was better than the chaos of a fractured galaxy. She had told herself that compromise was just another word for survival. And now, entire species were paying the price for her mistake. Just as the terrible truth sank in, the station's alarms blared. Dominion fleets had arrived. They didn't hail or offer terms. They simply appeared, a wall of gray metal and weapon ports, but a single message cut through the chaos. Vorn himself, his face appearing on every screen. He looked immaculate, calm, almost serene. Captain Varela, he said, his voice a chillingly familiar balm. You were the one who taught me that morality bends under pressure. I merely perfected the lesson. The battle for Kepri's spine wasn't a story of heroism. It was an act of pure, ragged desperation. The Vorex, thinking in cold, hard numbers, sacrificed entire broods of their own young, using their deaths as data points to calculate enemy fleet movements and predict firing solutions. To deny Vorn access to critical sectors, the Thalassa deliberately flooded entire sections of the station, drowning their own people alongside Dominion borders without a moment's hesitation. And then there was Kalrath, With a roar that echoed through the cums, a sound of pure, unadulterated fury, he led a suicidal charge. His scarred wings propelled him through the vacuum of space, a golden comet of vengeance. He tore through Dominion fighters with his talons, ripping them apart with a raw precision born from the ashes of his homeworld. It was magnificent, and it was heartbreaking. While the station burned around her, Nina Varela had only one target. Alone, she breached Vorn's flagship. She fought her way through his personal guard, a phantom moving through the corridors of the ship that represented everything she had come to hate. She found him on the bridge, waiting for her, as if he knew she'd come. He stood there, surrounded by readouts showing the destruction of Kepri's spine, a faint, knowing smile on his face. "You could have ruled beside me, Nina," Vorn said, his tone one of disappointment, not anger. "We could have brought order to this chaos. Instead, you chose to wallow in your guilt." Nina raised her pulse rifle, the weapon steady in her hands. "No, Malrec," she replied, her voice cold as the void outside. "I chose responsibility, but she didn't pull the trigger. Killing him would be too easy. It would be an ending, but not a solution. Instead, she exposed him. Using Dominion command protocols she had learned long ago protocols. He himself had taught her. She bypassed his systems. With a few keystrokes, she broadcast the truth to the entire Dominion. Every secret deal, every lie, every species he had promised safety before systematically erasing them from existence. The betrayal of the Arathi was just the beginning. She showed them all. His empire didn't collapse under the force of her weapon. It collapsed under the weight of truth. Within hours, Dominion controlled worlds. Worlds that had lived in fear and subjugation revolted. His own fleets turned on each other. His carefully constructed regime, built on cultivated fear, was devoured by the very terror he had sown. Malrec Vorn was torn apart, not by his enemies, but by the allies who had feared him most. In the aftermath, the galaxy did not heal. There was no grand celebration, no sudden peace. It simply survived. Kepri's spine was a graveyard of twisted metal and ghosts. The Arathi were reduced to a mere handful, their future a fragile thread. The new alliances were brittle, built on the shifting sands of shared trauma rather than trust. Among the wreckage of the station, Cal Rath stood beside Nina, his great wings drooping with exhaustion. He looked out at the starfield. "Power destroys," he said, his voice heavy. "Yet without it, we perish." Nina stared at the same cold, indifferent stars, witnesses to their desperate struggle. "Power isn't the problem, Cal Rath," she replied softly. "Who we choose to become while holding it is." The galaxy moved on, scarred and watchful. A new, fragile era had begun. And those who survived, those who were left to pick up the pieces, understood one brutal, undeniable truth. Hope is not gentle. It is not a gift. It is forged in ash. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this journey into the dark heart of science fiction, be sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell for more stories from the edge of the galaxy. See you next time.